Welcome. It's Flow Chaser Monday. My name is Lacey, and today I'm going to be presenting a theory on accessing the flow state. It is Memorial Day, May 25th. This is like the 21st Monday in 2026. So I'll talk a little bit about what this presentation is going to be about, a little bit about who I am, not much. And then I want to talk about burnout, and then we'll finally get to the juice, which is about chasing flow. And I have some theories and some ideas about how chasing flow is inherently different than pursuing a goal. A little bit about this presentation. There's like nothing to sell here. This is a practice that I'm doing for myself. I have this story about like consistency and how consistency as a driver of flow might be this whole thing that I've been missing out on. So I'm doing this presentation in 2026 at every Monday at 6 a.m. in order to sharpen my skills on presenting. We'll see if it's working or not. About 30-minute lecture the last few weeks. I've been like right at 30 minutes because it's been a little wild and busy, but that's what to expect. A little bit about who I am. I'm a really great cable knitter. Like I'm very creative. I like doing these projects. I've worked in a creative service-based business for over 10 years. I'm a brand and web designer. I'm also a highly sensitive person with inconsistent energy patterns, and that is related to kind of my search for flow and burnout too. But I am somebody who has a lot of personal and professional goals, which is where I feel that chasing flow can go a little haywire for me, if you know what I mean. And I am talking about burnout. And so, my whole theory about burnout is that it always starts with like a high capacity person. I haven't met anybody who's gone through burnout who didn't really care about the things that they were doing, the reason that they were engaging with them. They were strivers, like people who had a lot of goals and a lot of both personal and professional goals. But there was something about them that was very high capacity that other people recognized. And then other people recognize it and apply praise. They apply resources. They say, oh, you can do that thing. I will give you this to do that thing. And whether that thing allows the person personal fulfillment, that really like soul driven work, that's not really the question when you're talking about like a high capacity person given resources. Like, does it light you up, or is it just the golden handcuffs um, in another light? And so you have a high capacity person, they're given praise for doing something that might or might not actually be something that they enjoy and that they find fulfilling or even challenging. And then burnout happens. And burnout happens because of that disconnect between what you're actually striving for, what your soul wants, and what you're doing. And if there's a disconnect between that, it's painful and we go unconscious. We do these unconscious behaviors. Something about us tells us that we need to go for the thing that gets us the praise. And when we stop paying attention about what we actually enjoy, this burnout and unconscious behavior comes out of it because it's painful. And then we get into this chasing flow. Chasing flow is different than chasing goals because it inherently asks, what is your soul really asking for? What is it telling you to engage in? Like, what is your unique mixture that you bring to whatever situation? Burnout doesn't ask for that. It just asks you to do the thing that creates the praise or the resources in the world. Flow really asks you, like, why you? Why are you engaging in this? What is the unique about you or how you pursue this to act as a flow trigger into these really great feeling states? So that's what we'll talk about. We'll talk a little bit about what flow is, your brain on flow, how to chase flow, creativity and adaptability, which comes to this core of my theory and my presentation, and then radical self acceptance and alignment as a flow trigger. Sounds like fun, right? The whole goal of this presentation on Flow Chaser Mondays is to really re-engage with the meaning and the purpose behind the work, to find that thing that like really, really lights you up. And so when I give this presentation and I talk about what flow is, I really, on the other side of the screen, would like each person to consider how flow is unique to them. What are their drivers into this flow state? What does it feel like for you to even be in the flow state? How is chasing this like creativity and this hyper juicy flowing state different than just working and progressing through a goal? Just to get us all on the same page, I have this conceptualization of like what is a flow state. And if you can understand what a flow state is, it becomes a lot easier to find out how you can fit yourself into that flow state and have these really juicy, fun moments. And a lot of people remark that in a good feeling flow state, that time just kind of gets all like melty away, right? Our focus, whatever we're doing, whether it's on a conversation, we're performing, we are strategizing, we are in these states where time kind of feels melty away. We feel hyper engaged with what we're doing and very excited about it. We feel really like this is meaningful or purpose driven work. And so to get into that flow state, like where is it? Where does it exist in our lives, in our consciousness? And what I've internalized and I've thought about is that we all have this comfort zone. And this comfort zone is changing states all the time based on how much sleep you got, how much uh, hydration you're at, like what's going on in your life, like stress factors. Our comfort zones are these, breathing, moving pieces. And on the inside of our comfort zone, there's no questions. We know exactly what everything is, how everything is going to behave and act. We feel completely comfortable with our surroundings, with our bodies, with our everything is just, there's no surprises. We can assume with great accuracy what is going on. And as we move towards the outside of this comfort zone, and remember, the outside of this comfort zone is always changing based off of like our internal and external factors of what's going on in our lives. But when we start going to the outside of our comfort zones, we're starting to ask questions. And it could feel like in the early stages, I don't know what's going to happen. But I'm kind of excited to find out, like, the assumption that something good is gonna happen even when you don't know it, that's kind of, like, coming towards, the edges of your comfort zone. And at the very edge of your comfort zone is almost this liminal space, and I think before you get to dysregulation, and dysregulation, we can recognize it as something that's big and loud. Somebody is crying, upset, running away, they are in their, like, um fight or flight stress response dysregulation. And it can also look like, I just have to go pee. It's something that is happening either internally or externally, where it pulls your focus into resolving that and regulating. So it could look like the alarm going off of my phone. My attention is now pulled from whatever work that I was doing onto my phone. That is one form of dysregulation that kind of jogs your flow and gets you to focus on something else. It's neither good or bad. It just is what it is, right? But there is this space in between the outside of our comfort zone where we're asking a lot more questions and we don't know what's going to happen, that pulls our focus and there's like this complete absorption into what we're doing. And it could also be that we are outside of our comfort zone because there is this like hint of dangerous thing that we're doing. Like surfers, when they're hitting a really big wave, there's such an element of danger. That danger can really focus the brain into paying attention, and that will put somebody into a flow state where time kind of becomes bendy and they're able to either think about their maneuvers really fast or not think about their maneuvers because it becomes like an intuitive, very flow driven process. But that person has put themselves into this danger zone purposefully where they are on the outside of their comfort zone. They cannot control that wave. And at the same time, they're relatively comfortable that if they hit it at a certain angle and if they approach it just right, that they are going to come out of it well. But also when you're in a complete absorption and focus, which is what a lot of people would identify as the flow state, all the way up until you get to dysregulation zone. Either the danger is pulled back and you're able to feel your body more because you get such an adrenaline rush that when the threat is no longer there and you're coming off that adrenaline, that is a very dysregulating state, or at least a change where it can like get somebody like you shake after something. Whew, that was a lot. Or, even after a great conversation, kind of like the hangover that you get when you're coming from that, that can be kind of it jocks you back into a state of awareness of your body where you don't have your complete focus and absorption on what you are doing. So that is how I conceptualize like what is the flow state. And it also helps me remember that I can sometimes get myself into a flow state by asking questions and really identifying like where am I in my comfort zone? Am I at a place where I relatively know what's going on? Is this a very free flowing impromptu conversation where we're just like getting the ball flowing? That's where I feel a lot of my flow states is like conversing and having that like impromptu nature of the person says something and you go yes and then they go yes and they're building on this conversation but you don't know what they're going to say, and so that can really jot me into a flow state, maybe you as well. Sometimes when we're working, like when I'm working on a problem, you don't have the answers of like what this thing is going to look like that you're working on when you're done. And that in of itself is a very flow inducing challenge for me at least. But what I've found is that especially being married to somebody who I feel is like my complete opposite, the things that get him into a flow state are typically a lot different than mine. And I think that that's because flow really asks what is your comfort zone and what are your triggers and questions about. And that has a lot to do with like how your soul is configured in order to get there. But, you know, of course, we have a lot of the same dysregulation zones, things like he does jujitsu. And so when you get hurt, that kind of stops the match and you have to like regulate and then you can like get back into it. Right. But that would not be very flow inducing. I would be so afraid of getting hurt. I am so afraid of getting hurt when I practice jujitsu that usually I stay very, very close to my comfort zone. So I don't really access as many like flow inducing states possibly yet. Maybe that's something I'll look forward to later. But flow states feel so good and so special, and it's so much better than just like brute forcing, bulldozing towards a goal. I feel that flow really provides the resources internally. And part of that internal resourcing is when there is a challenge, when there's a question, when there is an engaging conversation, where there is like newness and discovery that's being created, or you are performing and really reacting to the dynamic of a crowd, or you're the crowd and you're enjoying a performance that maybe you've never seen before or that has this like dynamic newness to it. our brains respond to what is going on in our external world with this internal surge of neurotransmitters. And within that, we're getting dopamine, norepinephrine, endorphins, and anandamines. And those names might sound very familiar because those are the neurotransmitter levers that a lot of street drugs pull. And so when we say that these flow states feel good, they feel really good. And it's something that we are creating for free, free drugs in our brains in response to this external world. And I believe that the reason that we're getting this is almost this cosmic reward of how we are designed to engage with the world in a more dynamic and soul led way. That is my theory. Is that wild? I don't think so. So, when we talk about how to chase flow, remember goals don't care about who you are. Goals don't ask, like, what is your strategy or what is the ways that you find enjoyable or the questions that you naturally ask, who you are. They just care that you do things from linearly from A to B, right? Like that is how you work a goal. How you chase flow needs to be inherently different than how you would chase a goal. It asks, what is it about you that is personally engaged in what you are doing? What are the questions that you are asking about the things? There is this wonderful on the internet, you can look up Bashar on YouTube. It is a channeled intelligence. And there's Bashar is the name of the channeled intelligence. And um, there was five of these tips for life, like how to live life as a human, to what I really saw was in order to live this like high flow life. And this is what's called Bashar calls like the formula for living. And number one is act on passion. And I believe that this Bashar's formula, the next five steps is like this is the juice on how to live in the most max flow state as a human. I'm working on it. I am so not there, but like if there was a there, like this is the way to get it. Act on passion first because flow asks what about this activity is engaging for your mind in order to get that neurotransmitter response, in order to induce these flow states. You have to act on passion first. And passion is a lot different than what a goal or an objective is. We can't manufacture passion. It really has to come from an internal interest and internal drive. So we're acting on passion first and then act as far as until the excitement wanes. I believe that Bashar is referring to that dysregulation zone at whatever. So when the excitement starts to wane is when you're coming out of this flow state. And that's when you need to either tend to your physical needs or the needs of the environment, but act as far as till the excitement wanes. And then three, act on passion without assumption of outcome. Because in a good flow state, you don't know what the outcome is necessarily going to be good, bad, neutral, progressing. Like when you're, making a painting or I design logos and brands, you have to set out with, I'm just going to try it out. I'm going to try out these shapes and this configuration, but I don't know what the outcome of this is going to be. And I'm not going to assume that it's going to be good or bad. I'm just going to do it and try it and act on passion, like I act on intuition that this is the way that we're going to configure that and just be willing to see what happens. And then four, no matter what happens, to stay in a positive state. What Bashar is saying that if you can not reach dysregulation zone when things happen in these flow states, in these incredibly manifesting potential states where you are creating and coming up with ideas, you're having these conversations, you're making art, you are building, right? You are manifesting material things to stay in a positive state. So when things are made, I make a tulip and I'm just like, wow, that petal is just really off. And it just seems like it would never be made in nature that way. I don't know if I like that. But to stay in a positive state of like, wow, there's this petal that just is really disproportionate to the other one. I wonder, maybe it's because it needs to kind of like come in perspective that way. So just kind of saying in a positive state that no matter what happened, no matter what happy accidents, like a Bob Ross, happy little trees, like happy little accidents, whatever happens, we're staying in a positive state and we're not assuming the outcome is going to be bad just because this one little happy mistake hap- was made. And that gets us to stay in the flow state without reaching dysregulation, which is not necessarily the goal. Every flow state ends with some form of dysregulation. That is nature, that is natural. But we can get into these like longer, more fulfilling flow states when we can stay in a positive state. And then examine your beliefs and release fears. This is where creative confidence comes in. Whatever you're doing, if in the process of it, you become fixed on this isn't good, I'm really afraid that if I do this, then this will happen, you're going to reach your dysregulation zone a lot quicker. So if we can, as these beliefs come up, just say, like, that is in the potentiality. And also, this is a potential, and this is potential. So we're examining the beliefs. We're not accepting that one outcome that we're just thinking is the only outcome that is possible. And then we're releasing the fear of, like, well, what if that one? Well, what if? Can I still be in this and still feel ease and lean into the outcomes, to other outcomes as well, and examine my beliefs around them? So I just thought that Bashar, the formula, when I heard it, it was such a concise introduction into the flow state, and not only how to get into it by acting on passion, like do the things that you are passionate about that feel like your greatest potential for accessing these flow states, and then how to kind of stay within the borders and soothe yourself and um, really manage your thoughts and mindset while you're in these flow states in order to stay in them for longer before you get to dysregulation. And what I've learned is that the more you see this dysregulation zone as a natural kind of conclusion to these really hyper juicy states, it's almost like the the exit process of some really good work. And not as a thing that I should feel shame about. Like, I was, as somebody with ADHD, when we're in this focus and when we don't have focus, we can really get hard on ourselves for not having like the internal resources to really like dive into something. But what I've learned about accessing the flow state with these presentations is that dysregulation zone is just a natural conclusion and end to a really good feeling flow state. And while I can elongate these really good feeling flow states, I should not try to ever go past my body or my soul's like done time. And what a practice looks like for me now in order to extend the potential for the flow state is setting a timer, um, and like for 50 minutes when I work on like a work project and I tend to hyper focus into it. I set a timer because I will check in with myself at that time. I'll wrap things up. That just seems to be like um, a really good period to get into something and then to check into my body. So I make sure that I don't push past into like the danger dysregulation zone, because I can go there as somebody with like irregular energy patterns and moods, and then I just like crash out. So setting the timer helps me to just get to that like early stage of dysregulation without going much past it, in which a lot of regulation then needs to happen for me to like get back to my comfort zone and a place where I can like function normally. Maybe you can relate. Maybe it's like a mood disorder thing. I don't know. But dysregulation and is natural at then there's many variations of what that is. And it's not saying that you had like a horrible flow state. It's just saying that this is the natural end of the flow state. And now you get to do your self-care activities in order to nurture yourself into the potential for other flow states. Congratulations. And with all of this awareness as to where your dysregulation zone is, and also what puts you into a really great feeling flow state, you ultimately get to the point where you recognize that whoever you are, your own stew of talents, experiences, and challenges is worthy of acceptance and support because you have your own abilities and your own levers to get into this flow state. And the more that you accept it and realize that it's not necessarily the external motivators of, work says that this is should be the flow that I pursue and the challenges that I take on and the goals pursue, but I'm not personally interested or really challenged by that, or possibly that like that's not what your experience is. You when you take on this confidence that you're going to have unique flow triggers than other people, and that is based off of like what you are here to do on a soul level and not necessarily what you are here to do on a productivity, monetary, or whatever level. And because these things do feel interconnected of like our work and our flow and our dynamic with other people, how are we accessing these really good feeling productive states? You need to realize that it's radical self-acceptance and alignment that is going to get you into a flow state instead of this state of chasing and pursuing goals, because chasing and pursuing goals does not care about your self-acceptance and alignment, and it does not feel good, and it can lead to burnout. And so these are connected. I'm hoping that you're seeing that the things that make you unique, the experiences that you've had, the challenges that you've had, when you can fully accept those as part of your unique access into the flow state, that good feeling state of time bendiness, productivity, you can manufacture and create these flow states for yourself. And it's not through chasing goals. This will also expand your capacity. If you are doing things from that highest excitement, like Bashar said, like acting on excitement until the excitement wanes, your vitality and your juice for life is going to increase. And when you have that, when you are in that state of acceptance of yourself, and you have all of these wonderful experiences with work and with challenge and dynamics, because you understand your own flow triggers and how to get into this hyper productive state, then it expands your capacity. And when we understand what our dysregulation zone is and maybe set up tools like timers and things like that, we are expanding our capacity to be in the flow state. Another thing about the flow state that is unique to it than just like solving a challenge, when things happen when you're in a flow state, and that could be like a challenge is presented. So you're working on this thing and then you realize that this doesn't work and you need to go a completely different way. That was like an introduction of a challenge. This is actually like gasoline for the flow state. It is fuel for it. When challenges come in, that kind of re-engages the brain into the outer levels of the comfort zone because you just had another factor where you don't know what's going to happen. Now, these challenges can put you into dysregulation zone. It could be like, I am completely uncomfortable. I'm pretty certain this is not going to work out well. And now you're dysregulated and all your energy has to go back into regulation. Or you can use these challenges as flow inducing triggers to stay in that state. So noticing that, like, hey, a part of this flow process is that there's going to be an external challenge, or I'm going to learn something within this flow state. And that is going to be fuel to use within the flow state that is going to get me more engaged. So when you engage with these challenges as, oh, fuel for, maybe it's like a constraint on something and now I have to rethink it, but it reignites your engagement. Like, whatever happens, stay in a positive state, because or else we're getting out into dysregulation zone. So it gets us into this acceptance of challenges and maybe these things that, if you weren't in a flow state, if you were chasing a goal, you would see as a roadblock, as an obstacle. When you're in a really great flow state, you see that as fuel. And this expands your capacity to stay within the flow state, is my theory. What do you think? All right, that's the presentation for today. Look, we're right at 6:30. Thank you so much for joining or watching the replay. I don't have any stats on, I know I'm live on YouTube and on Riverside, which is where I record this. So if this ever gets watched, just thank you. This is my silly little experiment and my progress working on a presentation over a period of time. So I hope you have a really flow juicy week. And think about these concepts of how you engage with flow and how, what your dysregulation zone is. And do you need to really look at that so that you can trust yourself to be in these flow states for longer? Or maybe you need to like cut it off so that you build trust in engaging into them. We'll see. All right.